And now, once again, we have a soprano showing us that they are the rock stars of the opera. And if you're wondering what opera this comes from, there is. I wanted to start with this. Hope you agree, Katya. The name of the opera, I think that it's weird in English, it's weird in Spanish, it's weird in Italian, and maybe it's kind of weirder also in German, but mainly for the final word, because the Seraglio, if you in Spanish it says un rapto en el Seraglio, really means nothing because even if you're a native speaker, you really don't know what happened at the Serrallo because Serrallo is not a word that we use, and I am pretty sure that for Italians, neither Serrallo. What is a Serrallo? Um, in English, the abduction from the Serrallo, which is so that word the Seraglio, and it comes because the word makes reference to a culture that we are not very familiar with. So this is one of the weirdest names of an opera, of a complete aria, and still, if you ask me, and I know that many people is going to jump over my throat, I prefer this one to the magic flute. I am not saying, of course, because people really go to extremes. I am not saying that the Magic Flute is a bad opera or it's. I love Papageno. I love his duet with Papageno. The arias from the Queen of the Night, of course, are very attractive. But the complete opera, I like a lot more the mood of, in whatever language you want to say it, the Seraglio. Uh, it has a certain positive vibe. It tells a difficult story of the clash of two cultures. We are going to go back that again, but it tells the story in a very nice way from my perspective. The sound of Blonde I love, which is the part that Katia just sang. Constance I even like the spoken role of the Pasha, which leads us to the thing that it is a singspiel and not an opera, which is another conversation. And there are so many things about the vocals in this opera and the sounds of the orchestra and the assembles of all the voices that make me really love this by Maestro Mozart. But how about you? How do you feel? I'm not asking you to compare, or maybe yes. How do you feel about the Magic Flute and the Seraglio?
Well, I have to start saying that Mozart is my favorite composer. I think that his musicality, the way he plays and he makes jokes with his music through his work. This happiness and this Mozart spirit in you can find in every bar of his music. I think that it fits with me. It's not just that I feel comfortable singing his coloraturas, his agilities, because that's true. but but I like his spirit. He used to compose, to write in a very playful way, in a very playful style, and I think that exactly that's what makes it feels so comfortable for me. I love his line. So it would be a little bit difficult to say which one I prefer because honestly, um, thinking that the Queen of the Night has um, the highest note in an opera, written in an opera, because there is another. note. It's a G, and it's also written by Mozart. Vorrei spiegarvi odio, I think. It's a D. In the case of the Queen of the Night, it's an F. I love to sing the Queen of the Night, of course, but like we have said, if you are not understanding what is this about, you can say, oh, she's singing like a bird, and that's beautiful. But no, she's saying to her daughter to kill Sarastro. So there's nothing playful in that. In that sense, definitely yes, I would choose El rapto en el Serrallo
Mhm.
because it has many exotic cultural references, and we will be talking about Blonde a little bit more. And I think that she is a role, a character that doesn't fit in her time. She comes from the future, and I think that I'm in love with that.
Yeah, she certainly is, and maybe we should be addressing the cultural clash that I was telling about. And maybe my first point is going to sound a little political, but I wanted to make this clarification. We are aware, and let's remind us of our numbers. Again, thanks everybody for following us on Buzzsprout. We are reaching through Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, and many other streaming platforms. We are already reaching over 664 cities in 84 countries. Just think of the many cultures that are already listening to us. So, from our perspective, Katya's and mine, that we are more Occidental wise, we see it natural that the plot of the Seraglio is around an European that is going to be rescued from the hands of a pasha who treats her like nobody should be treating her. But keep in mind that the point of view of Mozart, even if he's very ahead of his time, very in the future, still he sees that from the Western eyes. Which means that I am not, or we are not disqualifying the points of view of people in Africa or in Asia because we are aware that things are done differently. We are aware. At no point in this program we want to criticize what your culture is about. When I was studying French, and let me go back to that because it's a very interesting um, receipt that I am want to share with you. I had a professor who came from Africa and told us that the village he came from, of course, of the north area of Africa, that were French colonies from Le Marais, if you are familiar with that area, the expression. He told us that in his village, the limit of wives his father could have is the money he has. If he had as much money as to have to be able to feed 40 women, he was allowed to have 40 women, and he explained us how that system worked. Of course, to the eyes of the Occidental or Western, our Western eyes, we saw it, but how is it possible? How do they accept? And we make many questions around that or those habits being wrong, but they are not wrong. They are just different. And just that was our first point of clarification. However, what I don't like here, and it's going to be the same case as with Rossini, because in a way, L'Italiana in Algeri has a similar plot. An European that is to be rescued from the situation that he is living. In the case of L'Italiana, it is Isabella who is going to rescue the man. But at the end, it's an European saving another European from the hands of the of the person, the man who possesses the ownership of the other person that is going to be rescued. And in both cases, both in L'Italiana and in Il Seraglio, the happy ending is when they are rescued and I really want to put it in quotes, they are rescued, and that's why it is a clash in the cultures, because to the eyes of the Western, she's being actually rescued, while it is only the way these things happen in those parts of the world. So for the many people who are watching us, please take our comments, taking into account that, well, we are 200 years ahead from when Maestro Mozart wrote it, and that Maestro Mozart wrote it with the eyes of an European, because he was a European, right? But take my words from that perspective. We are taking this conversation from the habits of people, Occidental people. And since this is all fun, because, and I opened it saying that Blonde is the rock star in El Seraglio, the same way Musetta is the rock star in La Boheme, because Blonde is sort of a servant to Constance, but she's not really, she doesn't really behave like a servant. I mean, she's more like, I was thinking, I'm not sure what you think about it, Katia. I think that Blonde behaves more like a Rosina. Like,
Yes.
hey, dude, things are not the way you think they are. Things are the way I say they are. So it is sort of a Rosina, a mix of a Rosina and a Musetta in Mozart's opera. And now, why don't we start talking about the actual aria, unless you want to share something else, Katia, before we get started.
No, no, no. Let's go ahead.
So, there are two very high sopranos, very high sopranos. You- I was thinking during the
Not
week,
that much.
what is the obsession of Mozart with the high sopranos? Because with Pamina, he does a fairly good job in the Magic Flute, more sort of a lyrical soprano. I know again people is not going to like my comment, more like a boring lyrical soprano. Because when you compare Pamina to the Queen of the Night, she doesn't even seem to be her daughter. I mean, vocally, the Queen of the Night is over here, and Pamina is like over here. Their melodies, there is nothing that relates them. If Pamina hadn't had said that, oh, my mother, nobody would ever suspect that she's the daughter of the Queen of the Night. But the Queen of the Night is very, very high, as Katy explained. And Constance, which is not the soprano we are talking about today, the other main character here, is super high, super elaborate, and Blonde sings less, but she basically sings ornaments. So I sing fewer than Constance, but I sing merely ornaments just to prove that I am the one who's doing it here. But along with it, because we shared it when we talked about Musetta, we said, but this is hard because you can look for versions of the of Blonde in the internet, and the same way as Musetta, you remember that we shared, you cannot just open "Quando me vo-" too lyrical because it doesn't work. It has to be this spicy sound in her voice so that you catch people. And the same thing has to happen with Blonde. It can just open in a boring because many sopranos go for singing it more lyrical and just go floating in the ornaments and agilities, but they open like very lyrical, and I don't think she should be like that. Tell us, Katia, how do you do it?
Well, Blonde is not the main character, but is the main character. So it's important to keep that in mind because when we talk about any idea that we want to express, they're not just words. They go with the support of our side, the way we use our voice to make some accent, like in this case, when you want to point something specifically. So if you have to believe yourself, you are not the main character, but you are, because Blonde is just the maid, but actually she's more like the best friend, and she is a very intelligent girl. She's a very brave girl, because we are gonna talk probably later about this, but one of the servants of the pasha is trying to conquer her, but she is already in love with somebody else, and she's telling this guy, well, you maybe try to conquer me, but if you are being rude, and if you're not being fun, if you're not being kind with me, I will never pay attention to you, because what is gonna catch a girl's eye is to be well treated.
And all that you say is very important because the attitude is not of a weak woman who is ceding easily to the flirting of the guy. On the contrary, she's not like Superman, Superman. I'm going to kill you like the Queen of the Night. I mean, it's not that extreme, but it is not weak. It is not Pamina. You see, she has to be. Not sure if we should say strict because she's going to tell him, hey, in order to conquer me, you have to do this and this and this, and not to do that and that in a sort of soft way, but still very
Firm.
like, look, man, you're going to do it like this, period.
I'm a maid, but you're gonna treat me like a princess.
Exactly. And also we mentioned in the past that Maestro Mozart, at least from the copies of the scores that we have, does not give many annotations on the score as we have shared con énfasis, con dolores, expresivo, and the many things that other composers have. But still, even if he doesn't give you all those notations, by reading the score, as we mentioned also before, by just reading the score, you say, I cannot be too excessive here because people are going to notice. If I exaggerate there, people are going to notice. And putting all that together, you have to conquer and call the attention of the public from those very first notes, which are not really hard. Or, well, remember that Katia will never say anything is hard, but by looking at the score, this initial part is really not that hard. Something that a fairly good voice should be able to do. But walk us through the first part, Katya. What indications do you have for everyone who's listening?
Yes. Beside the vocal work, I think that one of the most difficult things about singing Mozart is yet that you have to read between lines. It's not written in the score, but it's written in the score. So you have to pay attention to all the little details to build a good work with this music. Durch Zärtlichkeit und Schmeicheln, Gefälligkeit und Scherzen. If you start with this part using a very chest voice, a very heavy voice, believe me, you will not reach the highest parts. You have to start in a high impostation, and you will be pretty near of the highest part that comes ahead.
Which again is you have to, and I don't know why many singers don't think about it. And I think if they are still students or still new to singing, one can understand. But what about their voice professors? They should be telling you have to plan ahead. Because if you run out of fuel by the eighth or 10th bar, then there's no way you can get away with a complete aria. And what happens many times, especially when people are starting their singing careers, is that they want to overdo and exaggerate everything. So they give like too much chest, too much volume, too much expression to the beginning. So by the time they want to go light in the ornaments, it's simply not going to work. Instead of being one blonde, it's going to be like two or three blondes. The heavy blonde, the blonde trying to go high, and then the trying to go back because there is uh, this sort of repetitions on the way this area is constructed, the way it starts, it goes high, then it goes back. Uh, but by the third time you want to go back, since your voice was high, like floating, you're not going to be able to reach if you started with lots of chest voice at the beginning. What I want to explain is that it's going to be a mess, basically. So you plan ahead with your voice and say, "Hey, I am going to do this in the beginning because I want to be light enough." For the middle and still make a believable role so that when I go back to these parts that are more high, but still closer to the center, still believable, because I still have to go for those scales that we are going to see it in a second. They tend to grow. Because remember that for a soprano it is never enough, so they want to be climbing and climbing and climbing. So it's going to be climbing and climbing and climbing. So besides that, in the initial part, anything that else that you would like to point out? I'm not even sure if we have the same score, the one I'm sharing on this screen.
Probably not.
No?
I don't know. I can't read there, so I have my book.
Okay, but at least it's also in A major, right?
Yes.
At least because
Well, yes. Um, we have to develop our instrument, our voice, finding the highest impostation we can reach. If I sing it here, Dulce it's my highest impostation. I will sound like a squirrel, and that's not Mozart ideas, I'm sure. If I use my lowest part, it's it's difficult to keep the pitch and doesn't sound like Mozart should. So I have to know both of my extremes to wisely use my middle part. And it's just the beginning. Don't try to effort too much. There are so many bars ahead, so you have to use your infestation, your air, your volume. You don't have to impress anyone in this part. The orchestra will not be playing as a Wagner opera, so stay calm.
and we also mentioned in last program because this month turned out to be very Mozartian month because last week we had our Voi que sapete and yesterday it was aired the other aria from Le Notte de Figaro, non più andrai farfallone amoroso. And now in this season of spectacular singing we have Blonde's aria. So fortunately, lots of Mozart this month, so I think it comes in a good time that we repeat what we said last time. Because you were just sharing that don't put all the voice there because it's not going to sound like Mozart. And we also mentioned it with last week's with the Voi que sapete, and I think I mentioned it also in the Non più andrai. There are many baritones with very beautiful voices, this wonderful texture that many baritones have, and they think. Many times, unfortunately, they think that they can give all that texture to the non più andrai. It is not. It is not Giorgio Germont. He's not supposed to sound like Giorgio Germont. He's not Scarpia. He's not even Figaro from Rossini. So, absolutely anything that you do, it's going to sound basically horrible. And I wanted to go back to that part, not only because Katia gave us the example of how putting more of your central chest voice in the initial part, but because unfortunately there are way too many sopranos who do it like that. They think, oh, it's okay because since I have a very well developed chest voice, why not show in the public that I can do it with more power at the beginning? And does not sound like it is supposed to sound. Because remember that Mozart requires a very homogeneous voice. Not only has to do with the legato and the quality of the pitch, but also with the quality of the sound. So imagine that you're singing Non più andrai farfallone amoroso, notte giorno, then notte giorno. You say, what? And that's basically what many sopranos do in this area in the opening. Go with too much voice, showing the whole range of what their notes are, the whole sound of their voice, and that is not what is required. So please, people, most people in Mozart refrain from doing all the things that you do. In Puccini, certainly you will need it. In Verismo, you will need it. In Verdi, you will need it, but not for Mozart.
Not at all.
Now, why don't we go for the following phrase? Since we are not reading the same score, maybe you should be telling me where we continue, and I put it on the screen.
Well, we have Robert Mahdi here, but it's kind of the same phrase. Probably we could talk about Doch myrisches Befielen,
Mhm.
Holterzanken plagen.
That part, if you agree, and maybe you can elaborate it because it's going to be important. Maestro Mozart has served himself or for the soprano these notes that are not. They are basically spoken. If you see them, they are pretty much at the same height with differences of semitones. So this is not again to be super spectacular, but they need not to be boring. Because that's the second mistake. The first, you start singing like you were the countess, the first part of the and in the second part, you say, it's basically spoken, so I just don't care and get boring about it. But remember that Blonde needs to keep the interest of people. Ta-da, 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 dun, dun, ta-da, 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 dun, dun, dun. Because every syllable that she's using has an intention. It has a purpose. If let's add just invent some words in English just to give you an idea. I am telling you to do this da 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 and pay attention to what I say. It is like that. Every syllable has a certain intention, and that is again, remember, for Katia, nothing is difficult, but from my perspective, that is super difficult because it has to sound, but pay attention to what I'm saying. It's not pay attention to what I'm saying, like, Blonde is, if you allow me an expression also, is dominating the guy with her words. She's not super huge. She's not super powerful. She's not a queen or a princess. But with his words, her words, and her presence is telling, hey man, this is the way it needs to happen.
Yes, I remember that I made this exercise like 4 times officially within my singing class with my teacher, and it was to sing the same idea in Spanish. In this case, because it is my natural language. Uh, Try that if you are preparing this aria or something else, and you feel that you are not getting all the intention of the words. Try to sing in your own language the same idea, and it will not sound the same at all. You will make it with sense. It will change so much. It's
And
a great exercise.
yeah, that's what I was going to tell you. I wish more teachers used that type of exercise because um, by listening now, and that's going to be a later video blog entry because I'm going to work on sharing with you my thoughts after reviewing a good number of voice contests. That you look at the contestant and you basically know that he has no idea of what he's saying. Think, for example, of Butterfly, after un bel libedromo, chi sarà, e come sarà giunto. So he's saying, and who is he, and who is he, and how is he going to get here? And they say, and who is he, and who is he, and how is he going to get here? And something like that. You notice that maybe, or certainly Italian is not the native language of the singer, but she doesn't understand and she doesn't feel the words because when you feel the words, the intention of what you're saying, our brain is wired so that we naturally give that intention. So if you're telling, hey man, you are going to do this, you basically know, hey man, you are going, the intention, how you're playing with each of the syllables is going to come natural. But if you don't care about doing that, most likely nobody's going to like your blonde.
Not even you.
Not even. Well, there are many who do very poor jobs and still like themselves. So I couldn't be so sure about that one.
Well, somebody has to love it.
Yeah, somebody has to. Maybe your mom. Yeah, moms usually do it. So I think that could be very much for these bars that are more like spoken and that many people say, many singers say, ah, it's the boring part. Let's move ahead for the ornaments that are coming. Um, Yeah, remember that you can leave the reading of the score since
Of
I am
course,
reading a
yes.
different one.
Yeah. We are just in this part on Portersanken plugin. That I feel that is a very good point to prepare yourself for what comes ahead. That we will be repeating this Das in wenig Tagen soll ich verstreuen weit, mach das in wenig Tagen. Please do this as link as possible, as high as possible, connected with your chest voice, of course, but prepare yourself vocally, but emotionally, because of the scales that comes next.
And not because there is a scale coming, forget about what precedes the scales, because all those um, all those notes need to be. I want to say lovely in the sense that people need to like it, but not lovely like you're a lyrical soprano.
No,
It,
no, no, no.
it has to sound nice to the ear because this part that precedes the scale needs to be aligned to what is coming next. I'm not sure if I am explaining it correctly. You're flowing from almost this part that we were saying is kind of a slow, like that looks like speaking, and then you're going to start with your ornaments, like preparing for the true fireworks that are coming ahead, but it has to sound nice because the scale is going to be a consequence of how well you did the previous part. Unless you want to do a horrible part and then suddenly come up with a nice scale, which I
And
don't
then
think.
even worse later.
And things get worse and worse as you progress. But
Yes.
since there are many bars with continuous uh, ornaments and aids, and there are suggested rests, pauses, silences. I'm not sure if you would fully agree to follow those pauses or if you suggest singers to work their own way out, or what would be your advice? Because we have shared in the past, if you come and suddenly sounds like you run out of air, it's going to sound horrible. If you cut something that is expected because you ran out of air, it's going to be weird. But how do you feel about the rests that are in the score? Do they make sense to you? Do you suggest to do some changes there?
No, I think that if you are trying to sing Blonde, it's because you already have the condition to hold these phrases and make these pauses. Something different will cut the idea, will cut the line. So my advice would be really to respect what is written.
And practice or exercise the suggestion that you did on breathing. Don't stop the car after plug-in, because if you stop the car in plug-in before mute, you stop the car and you want to go for mute immediately, it's not going to work.
Yeah, probably sounds like pretty simple, but it will help you to control your air and your phrases. If you're working with this R, if I
And,
can do it, you can do
and,
it.
and you reached a scale with an R, but Blonde, of course, has to sing those notes, which if you take by just taking a quick look at it, it looks like challenging. It is. I'm not really sure how to put it. I think I've seen harder scales, much harder scales, which doesn't mean that this one is easy.
It's not.
It's not easy, but I always come to it always comes to my mind the scales of Armida from Rossini that are endless and ascending and then descending and then ascending again and then descending again forever, like forever and ever and ever. So that's why when I go to this one and I look at it, I say, much easier than singing Armida. But do you have any particular suggestion, either for the passage before or for the scale itself?
Yes, we have this E before the scale.
Hmm.
Uh, Try to don't turn up the car in another sense on that note, on that pitch, because if you think this as an enormous, as a huge note, and then you try to move your voice and your air through the scales, it will not happen. Try to think on this note like several fastest possible notes. And it will flow by itself. It's easy, trust me.
But you also mean it because we jumped immediately to the scale, and that's why I was asking you earlier about the rests or the pauses or the time for breathing, because it in the previous pause it's one, two, three bars and a half ahead. So that means crap. It's going to sing three and a half plus another one plus another. It will almost be around six bars without breathing. So And Katy has just said that if you wanted to sing Blonde, you were already ready to do it. So
You
maybe
should.
maybe you should reconsider if making all those sounds throughout 6 bars without breathing is really doable.
Yeah, well, probably we could take a rest between Tagens and Solib Astroyant. In that part, and we probably could make a rest between Solib Hearts Troyant, between us and Troyant, because Trojan Vita, it has to be alive.
And maybe going back also a little to the lower note just before the scale, um, many people lose lots of air, or I don't know why, don't ask me why, but many people, many singers think of low notes like throwing out more air. So by the time they want to reach the middle of the high, of course you have no air because you threw it all. And I really don't know why that happens. Maybe with your students or some other colleagues that you have heard singing, you notice that when they are preparing and they come from a low note, it's like in the sake of having control of the air, they like put too much tension in the thoracic cavity. And so like like trying to sound more powerful, which is contrary to what we need, at least when we are going to do an ascending scale. Because if you're, as Katia has explained, if you're coming from a position like oh, then at some point it's not going to work because the position was not ready to do that. And moreover, if you run out of air because you said, oh, I'm going to sound like a bass. Oh, no air. By the time you want to start the scale, you won't even be able to finish the scale. I can assure you that. So, if you notice, there are many things that make our lives difficult, but it's because there is no careful planning in what comes ahead, in how you breathe, and how you're going to position your voice. Again, not saying that it is easy, but we make our lives more difficult by not planning, by not looking ahead to what comes next.
Yeah, something that I used to comment with my students is when you have to, well, not just when you have to sing a very large phrase, but usually or always uh, think or imagine that you are singing through a stroke. That will make your air and your sound with a direction. It will not just flow like a cloud or like well I don't know without direction, without sense. If I sing Sorry, Pastrojen I'm reaching the end of the phrase, but it's not the same. If I'm thinking about this space, it is a pencil. If I think about my way out in this size, Streuen it will get a good a good point. It has more direction. I reach a longer distance. Um, I have more control. I have more air, and I think it sounds better and it's easier.
And I don't think we have mentioned it in these episodes because I recall that I mentioned it in the Pache Pache Mio Dio, because a recent blog entry was the Pache Pache Mio Dio, and I was comparing Leontine Price, which thanks God nobody has criticized me for me criticizing Leontine Price, because I know that many people also will jump over my throat, because we were paying attention to the high note. You know, at the end is ma chi giunge, chi profanare ardesce il sacro loco, maledizione, maledizione, maledizione. And I was sharing that what I didn't like about her note, of course, it is just a si bemol, so why should she have a problem in a si bemol? But when you compare her sounds to Renata Tebaldi's, I'm going to explain why it relates to what Katia just explained. You want to listen to a very, very beautiful si bemol. I don't want to say explosive, like just scatter all over the place, but I want to say like when you reach that note, that the quality of the sound is so bright, so very well sung, that you are sure that that note was really sung not only in pitch but in a very good quality of the sound. If you listen, and it is expensive, an expensive sound that fools all the place, you know that it is well emitted. But when you listen to that sound from Leontine Price, you sound, even if it is in pitch, you don't see that like a rocket. You don't see all that fire coming from the rocket. It's just like it's flying like this. And it has to be the same because the scales are going to be ascending. I was sharing with you. It's going to be pretty much what Katia has just shared so far. The main difference, besides some other variations, are that the scales are going to be climbing higher, but if the soprano reaches the peak of each of the scales and it doesn't sound that bright, like covering the whole place, it's not going to work. What's the purpose of reaching a si bemol, a do, or a b, or an if, a d flat, when the sound is going to sound like constricted in the soprano's throat? Not sure if I'm explaining it. You want to listen to a sound that expands, bright and expensive, not a constricted small sound that, yeah, it was a D sharp, but what advice do you have for our dear listeners on that part, on the quality and expansion and the brightness of the high notes so that they are interesting to hear?
These high notes are like we just said. Blonde is a rock star, so she's not saying kill Sarastro and go for his head. She's saying she's a lady and she has to be treated like. So she's brightening, she's glittering. So don't effort too much. In the first place, you will not be able because you already sang the entire aria, and you will not be at the full of your voice in this point, honestly. Even if you are using your voice wisely, you will be already a little bit exhausted. So you will not be able to sound like the queen of the night, and you don't have to. You are playing. You are being a little yes. I want this. I want that. You are flirty. So sound like a flirty girl. It's not in triple F.
Yeah, and still it's tricky, but besides what you mentioned, and it has to be in a way relaxed. You're not threatening to kill anybody. No, you're not saying, "Oh, this man is going to leave me," and no emotion like that. So the capacity of the singer to provide that particular color, besides the notes, is what makes this role challenging, because otherwise it could be anybody else, but this um, aria passes the message very clearly. Me, an European girl, is not going to proceed as the women from your native country. These are my rules, these are my expectations, and you have to align to my expectations. Me, I am not
It is
going to.
interesting. Sorry,
Yeah, yeah, go
it
ahead.
is interesting because we said when we started this episode, it was written in the 18th century, and Blonde is a girl and is a maid. But she comes from the future because that's something that we are listening in girls in these times. Okay, so I'm a powerful girl. I work for myself. I have done this and that, and I deserve this, and I want that, and I'm my own self. But she's saying everything in this sense, and she's a maid in the 18th century. So I love Blonde.
Blonde is it really is a musetta in Mozart's opera. She's sure of herself. She is not afraid of speaking up for what she thinks and drive the car to whatever she wants to drive. So she really is a very advanced character, contrary to Constance. Constance is more. Yeah, I didn't want to say boring, but
Somebody
she's
save me.
yeah, she's different. Blonde, not from the very beginning. You say she's the girl, and Blonde makes sure she tells everybody, "Hey, I might be the maid, but I'm here to do what I want to do." A final piece of advice as we're reaching the end of today's program, Katia, just keeping our focus on the scale.
Uh, yes, Ricardo, thanks. Well, this needs lots of air, not just because we have long phrases, but because we have to use the same color in our voice. It is written in a very extensive register. We have uh, a middle E and the highest one. And it has to sound that you are the same singer in the beginning of the aria, but also in the end. So use your air wisely, take care of your impostation. Remember, you have to develop the highest one, but also the lowest one, and use the middle mixed. That will make you sound as one single singer.
Like, look, I have three singers singing. It's like Le Conte of Man, like having Antonia, so, yeah, each one singing an act, but in this case for an aria. As a final question that I wanted to ask you is, some people advise that when you go for a role, you make sure that the highest note written is below your actual extension. So in this case, if you're singing the E, to make sure that at least you have an E sharp. Because if you're singing on a stage very exposed, you're very, very, very top of the register. It's like too risky. Yeah, but that could lead us to the fact that no many singers have notes above the E. Well, many times not even above the D. So, what
Yes,
did you suggest?
well, I think that we have to be very serious about what can we do, not just what we want to do, because that's reality. I mean, um, I can love Figaro, but I don't sound like Figaro, so I would not sing that. To sing this is in a very comfortable and easy way. It's because you are practicing, in my case, a G and A. So this E for me, it's not the most difficult or the highest pitch I sing. Um, it's not publicity for the book, so I will cover probably this part. But it says coloratura arias. If you are not coloratura, you can practice. It's not forbidden. You can try. You can study, but be conscious that probably it will not sound and it will not be as easy as it will be for a soprano coloratura.
Because the first
That's
scale
that's
that
the truth.
reaches a B, very good. Then the next one, I think it's a C sharp. Where is that?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, there is a C sharp, and the final one is an E. So, people are expecting the E. Let me tell you, people are expecting the E. If you don't have that note comfortable, I wouldn't suggest that you go for it.
If you used to vocalize just to that E or a C and you don't move higher than that, probably this area is not for you. You have to work harder. You have to go far and far away without exposing yourself. Of course, you don't have to get hurt after studying or practicing. But if you're not feeling comfortable with this, probably it's not for you, and you shouldn't try.
Absolutely. So, this is for today's program. Thank you very much for having followed us on this premiere of the Season 8 Spectacular Singing with the incredible aria, Blondes aria from Il Seraglio. Hope you enjoyed the program. Any final words, Katia?
Uh, Thank you for being with us.
We really appreciate you all being with us. Thank you very much and see you on the next episode of Season 8 in a month. Thank you.